Are you a fan of the dark, the mysterious, the strange, or even the paranormal? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Something Scary. Amusement parks are known to be places filled with fun, joy, thrills, and, in the month of October, even scares. There's one park in particular that takes scares to another level. Kings Island Amusement Park, located in Mason, Ohio, is one of the most haunted amusement parks in the world. To truly begin to unravel this ghostly mystery, we have to go back more than 100 years. So let's start our story in 1872 with Joseph Warren King and his nephew. They own the Miami Powder Company near Xenia. It is unsure whether there was a hostile takeover from an out-of-state powder company or they sold it in 1877. But either way, in 1878, the Kings created the Great Western Powder Company. They put it on the banks of the Little Miami, where Kings Island stands today. They renamed the operation the King Powder Co. and built King's Mill around it for the factory workers. In 1887, J.W.'s son-in-law, a Baptist preacher by the name of Gershom Moore Peters, founded Peters Cartridge Company. These factories took up both sides of the river, and here is where it gets really interesting. There are 20 known explosions that resulted in many deaths. This one happened in 1890. The freight train was halted at King's Mill to pick up some cars filled with blasting powder. The story here got a little confusing, but no matter what exactly happened, the train brakes failed and it rammed into 1,600 pounds of powder in cartridges. The explosion itself killed roughly 12 people, and the fire that the explosion caused wasn't put out for another 5 hours. The second most notable explosion happened in 1942, and the only thing I could find on this explosion was that it was large enough it shattered windows 30 miles away in Kentucky. And from other rumors I've heard, it could have killed upwards of 100 people. The park opens in 1972, and about a decade later, on Friday the 13th in May of 1983, the park sees its first death. John Harder was at a grad night event, and he was exploring the restricted areas of the Eiffel Tower. It is unsure exactly what happened to him, and also some of the information could have been exaggerated from people telling the story over time, but most people agree that he either fell down the elevator shaft or he was crushed by the elevator's counterweights. In 1976, just a couple years after the safari opened, John McCann, a 20-year-old Lion Country safari ranger, was mauled to death by one of the lions. I read a whole report about the investigation into this incident. It was most likely due to a safety violation on his part. On June 9th, 1991, a day known as Black Sunday in park history took the lives of 3 people. It all starts with Tim Brenning and his friend William Eddie Heathcote. Tim decided to dip his hand into the water fountain to splash his friend Eddie. What he didn't know was that there was a short in the electrical lighting, and he was thus electrocuted and fell in. His friend went in to save him, was also electrocuted and fell in. A security guard came to their rescue. Now it's time to get to the good stuff, the stuff you've probably been waiting for, all the ghosts and specters that haunt Kings Island. The most noticeable of these is Tram Girl, or Missouri Jane. She's a 4 to 5-year-old girl in an 1800s-style dress. She can be seen throughout the park, but she is mostly spotted in the parking lot, at the front gate, and she also likes to jump out in front of the tram, which is where she gets her first name from. One driver in 2017 had just finished dropping off the last few passengers for the night and was headed for the main parking lot. He was tired after a long day, so when his tram headlights illuminated a young girl wearing a blue dress run right in front of his vehicle, he was slow to react. The driver did slam on his brakes, but he was sure he had hit her. But oddly, he didn't feel an impact or hear any screams. He climbed out, but the parking lot was empty, and nothing was under the tram. After inspecting the front for damage, he was surprised there was none. The little girl had disappeared as quickly as she had appeared. Where she gets her second name from has to do with an episode of Ghost Hunters, actually. Season 8, Episode 1, for any of you who are interested. They found a headstone in the Dog Street Cemetery that is on Kings Island grounds of a girl who would have been 5 years old when she passed away in 1846. It is assumed that she drowned in a lake that is now used for the Whitewater Canyon. Another famous apparition is Racer Boy. He's a little boy seen in white near the racer coaster. He can be found on the tracks or in the tunnels. His story is a little bit more interesting. 2 of the 4 cars that belong to Racer Coaster used to belong to a Coney Island ride called the Shooting Star, where a little boy was found on the tracks after falling from the ride. The only thing that kind of discredits his story a little bit is that sightings of Racer Boy began in the 1990s. Our next spooky park guest is Tower Johnny, who can be seen from the Eiffel Tower. Any electrical malfunctions or trip sensors that happen around the park are referred to as Johnnies by park employees. And as you may have guessed already, his sighting started shortly after John Harder's death. Here are some experiences a park employee had. I worked at PKR on the tower in the early and mid-90s. As you can imagine, spending 10 hours a day all summer on the tower lent itself to experiencing some pretty weird things. I have several stories which I could share. I was usually not alone, and others can attest to many unexplained happenings while working during these years. Although I can't remember a time when Johnny would reveal himself in a way that guests would be aware of him, he certainly wanted the crew to know he was around. His favorite tricks were closing, opening the elevator doors, sending elevators up, down on their own, elevators stopping during transit. Yes, this all happened. Mostly just the ride performing operations that no one instructed it to, and no explanation, even from maintenance. This could have been electrical problems with the elevators themselves. Lightning would strike, system glitch, etc. A poltergeist by the name of Woody can be experienced at Observation Tower 2. Tower 2 is located deep in the woods, accessible only by a small footpath. He's experienced by the disembodied sounds of children giggling and rocks being thrown at the observation tower. Here is a story from someone who used to work at Kings Island. One night, I was closing in Tower 2 on Whitewater Canyon. The protocol for closing this ride was when the last person got off the ride, the boats were ran through empty one time. This could take about 10 minutes or so. So I'm sitting in the tower, looking out the big front window when all of a sudden, I hear laughing. It sounded like children coming from right around my tower. I couldn't tell if it was male or female, but I called back to the control station to ask them if there were still people on the ride, and they told me that the last person had already gotten off, and the empty boats were cycling. Now, if anyone has ever worked WWC, they would know that Tower 2 is way out in the woods, a pretty lengthy stroll from the rest of the park. You have to walk down a very poorly lit trail through the woods to get out there. There are no trashmen out there, no reason for anyone to be out there. It is literally the end of the road. Back to the story. I hung up the phone and waited for the boats to finish so I could go back in. All of a sudden, little rocks started tapping up against my side window. I got on my loudspeaker and told whoever it was to stop. I looked out the window and there was no one there, but the rocks kept coming. Then they started hitting the window on the other side too at the same time. I'm feeling a bit bold. I'm the girl in the movie about to open the door the killer is hiding behind, and you're yelling, "Don't open the door, you idiot!" So I get up and walk out the door to look to see who is playing this prank on me. There's no one there. But I look and I see the rocks coming directly from the ground up to the window with no one there to throw them. I was so scared. I ran back in and got on the phone with the control station and told my supervisor what had happened. She said when the boats were done, she would send someone out to walk me in since I was so shaken up. Just then, I hear this loud bang come from behind me, and I turned around just in time to see a large rock, about 10 inches in diameter, slam up against the side of the door and fall to the ground. I ran out the door and looked down the steps. The rock was too big for any person to throw from the bottom of the staircase. But there was no one there at all, and definitely not enough time for anyone to run back down the steps without me seeing them. Needless to say, I refuse to close Tower 2 ever again. The Beast is also supposedly haunted. Riders have claimed to see glowing red eyes in the woods near the ride. It is believed to be someone who died on the ride, But I did a lot of research and I could not find anything about that. It is also supposed that the octopus ride is haunted, also believed to be someone who died on the ride. But I couldn't even find any indication that the ride was actually haunted. It's time to ask the real question from all this. Is Kings Island Amusement Park really haunted? Or are they just rumors to attract more tourists? We may never truly know the answer to that question. But what we do know is that it's something scary.